Hello, delightful makers. In this video, I'm going to talk with you about thread weights. Thread weights are the thickness of the thread, and they can range all the way from 8 to 80. They may go higher or lower. Those are just the weights I work in between. The weird thing about thread weights that can be a little confusing is that the lower the number, the thicker the thread. So an 8 weight thread is thicker than an 80 weight thread. Now what I have for you here is I have done a straight stitch and a blanket stitch with 5 different weights of thread so that you could kind of see the difference in the thread types. So I have an 80 weight thread. This is very fine and very thin. It is really good for piecing because it really disappears into your piecing and reduces bulk in your seams. A lot of hand applique makers will use this thread because it also disappears into that turned edge of the applique, and it kind of hides and becomes invisible and is a really good thread for hidden stitches. Now the 80 weight thread is this first line here, so you can see how fine and thin that is. And then it is this first blanket stitch here. And so you can see how thin that is. Now my blanket stitches are puckering just a little bit, and that's because it's just a single layer of fabric. So there wasn't the extra fabric to help hold that fabric. And I probably could have played with my tension a little bit. Tension will be in another video. So that is the 80 weight, this first line in both groups here. Next is the 50 weight thread, which is the most common for quilters. It is a nice thin thread, not quite as thin as the 80 weight, but still really thin. Really doesn't show up when you are creating your projects, and it's a great thread that tends to be pretty multi-purpose. It works really well for applique, for your simple applique stitches, but it's also really great for piecing because it doesn't create any bulk in your seams. So this second line right here is the 50 weight, and this second line here is the 50 weight, and you can see it really shows up really nicely. So it's a great thread. Most of the threads that you purchase will probably be 50 weight that you are purchasing for quilting. Then we have the 40 weight. Now Aurifil is really clever in how they do their threads because the spools are different colors based on the weight. So the 50 weight spools are all orange and the 40 weight spools are all green. That makes it really easy for you to tell which spool is which without having to try to squint. So the 40 weight is just a little bit thicker. You can see here the difference between them. There's not much of a difference. And you can see it even better here. Here's the 40 weight and here's the 50 weight. So you can see that even though it's a different color, you can see that line is just a little bit thicker, and you can see the line is just a little bit thicker for the blanket stitch. Now I will show you in this project here. This is a 50 weight on the strawberry stem, and this is a 40 weight on the strawberry. And when it's in the project, there really isn't a huge difference. The 40 weight shows just a little bit more than the 50 weight, but a lot of times that is even determined by the fabric versus the thread color. Like down here, you can really see it because that pink is slightly lighter than the pink of the fabric. So I wanted to show you what it looks like in a project. There's not a huge difference between 40 and 50 weight, but the one thing that I love about 40 weight is it does show just a little bit more, and it is what I use the most often with my collage quilting. Because it is slightly thicker, it tends to break less as I quilt across those layers of steam-a-seam. So this is my favorite for piecing. this is my favorite for quilting collage quilts. It's also really good for quilting in general because, as you can see, your stitches do show up a little bit more. So if you're wanting your stitches to be a little more visible in your quilting, then 40 weight is really good for that. It's a little bit thicker, which allows it to go through layers a little more easily. Then we have 30 weight, which is becoming my new favorite for collage quilting because it shows up even more. That is this line here. So again, just a little bit thicker than the 40 weight. You can really see on the spool that thickness. So here is the 30 weight and here is the 30 weight. So now you can really see there's a big difference between 50 and 30. This is becoming one of my new favorites for collage quilting because it shows up really lovely against the fabrics of the collage. It doesn't break as I'm quilting, and it makes really pretty stitches for applique. And then last but not least, one that isn't used quite as often, this is 28. So 28, again, in Aurifil is gray, and the 28 is really cool because it gives you, it's not much different from the 30 because there's not much difference between 28 and 30. But again, it gives you kind of a thicker line, thicker stitches. If you're wanting your stitches to be the star of the show, then you would want to go with a 28 or a 30 weight. And I didn't mention, but the 30 weight that I have here, this is Scanfil. It's 100% organic, this little wooden spool. Super cute, very lovely thread. I actually have way less lint with this thread than I have had with any others. So those are your different weights. You have 80, 50, 40, 30, and 28. And depending on what you are wanting to do determines which type of thread you will choose. If you are just quilting, then you are probably using 50. If you're doing lots of teeny tiny piecing or hand applique, you are probably going to use 80. Machine quilting or more visible applique stitches, 40. And then 30 and 28 when you really want those stitches to shine and your thread becomes the star of the show. So what's really interesting is even like running my fingers across, I can feel the difference in the weights. Like this one I can barely feel, but this is definitely raised above the fabric. So those are your most common thread weights and how they are used. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite thread weight is, or the thread weight that you use the most often, and go make something beautiful.